natural resources. We pray for the protection of our parish, residents, businesses during this hurricane season. We give thanks to God for our brave and courageous men, women in our military who daily risk their lives to protect our precious freedom. We pray for our world leaders to know how to obtain world peace. We also pray that this government body comprised of both council and administration will always serve our parish with honesty, humility, equality to all. And as this government body gathers here today, we pray for the wisdom to know right from wrong and the courage to do that which is right. Amen.
Thank you. General, would you lead us in the pledge, please?
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
The machine is open for roll call. Thank you, ma'am.
You're welcome.
All members are present except Dr. Gui, who's out. Okay. Have any executive sessions?
No, sir, there's no executive session. Number 3, status report by the Executive Port Director.
Good afternoon, Mr. President, Mr. Chairman, Mr. Vice Chairman. Mr. Vice Chairman's not here, and members of the board. I am Sandy Sanders, Executive Director of Plaquemines Port, Harbor, and Terminal District. Follows is my Executive Director's report for the reporting period of 24 May through 12 June. During this time frame, we met with the leadership at CPRA and reviewed the future projects with them and expressed my desire to partner with them to not only stretch our budget dollars by integrating any phase of our projects with their master plan, but to get their buy-in and design criteria that will promote coastal restoration. They are ready and willing participants. We participated in the Port of South Louisiana sponsored TIFIA presentation, which is the Transportation Infrastructure Finance and Innovation Act, in order to familiarize ourselves with the available government-sponsored rail infrastructure low-interest loans. It was very well done, and kudos to the Port of South Louisiana. We met with Damia Jackson and Daryl Broussard of the local district of the United States Army Corps of Engineers regarding 2 projects the port can team up with the parish to combine needed dredging in Tiger Pass, and through the beneficial use of the dredged material can provide coastal restoration and protection to areas in the vicinity of Venice Port in the Southwest Pass. Again, we will also partner with CPRA to maximize our funding as we work projects in the state's master plan. Following my executive director's report, I have asked that the Corps of Engineers, both Damia Jackson and Daryl Broussard, to give the board and the public a presentation, which they are here and prepared to do. I sent to the board this morning the great news about Venture Global and their commercialization efforts with regards to the country of Poland. This was also promoted on a world stage when President Trump met with the President of Poland. So kudos to our client, Venture Global, and their success is our success as well. Lastly, following the Corps of Engineers presentation, I have invited Eric Sundstrom with the Chesapeake Group and Chris Leopold, our state rep, to provide a situation report on the happenings in the state legislative session. Incidentally, I have also signed off on Eric's contract to lobby on behalf of the PPHTD in Baton Rouge for an additional 2 years. At this time, I would like to introduce Ms. Damia Jackson and Daryl Broussard with the Army Corps of Engineers.
Please state your name and your address.
Thank you, sir. My name is Daryl Broussard. I'm with the Corps of Engineers, New Orleans District. I am the Senior Project Manager for what we call the Louisiana Coastal Area Project, which is geared towards coastal restoration. So thank you all for allowing us to speak to you all today and tell you a little bit about the LCA program. Will they see it?
Kim, you ready? There we go.
I'll be real brief. I have 2 slides just to talk to. This is the coast of Louisiana, and the red lines, what you see is where we have initiated beneficial use of dredge material projects. The whole program here is aimed at maximizing the federal dredging that takes place in our state and using that material beneficially for coastal restoration. That's how we try to marry up all these different pots of money. It appears that when we can marry up these pots, we can do a lot more. So we take advantage of the dredging, the federal 100% dredging that happens on the federal side. We marry that up with construction money that comes through the LCA, Louisiana Coastal Area Program. And then we marry that up also with a non-federal sponsor. In most cases, it's been the parish, but the state of Louisiana through CPRA has come in and cost shared and through the construction side of these projects with us whenever we are consistent with the state master plan. So in most cases, we try to stay consistent with the master plan so that we can capitalize on those dollars. Next slide, please. So this is just a blow up of the area that we anticipate that we would do a beneficial use project with you all. It's where we would actually dredge the channel Tiger Pass. I know it hasn't been dredged in quite some time, but the federal government has dollars now to dredge that. I think he has about $9.5 million, and we would tag on to that project and actually place the material. And if you can see, there's a couple of cells around the wagon wheel. Most folks are familiar with the wagon wheel. We are actually building a ridge right now on another Bud Mat project at the top of that Spanish Pass. And these little cells that you see here where open water is, we would actually take material from Tiger Pass, place that material in these open water areas, and naturally we expect that the marsh will take and grow. That adds extra protection to the Venice area and to Plaquemines Parish. While it's not flood protection, it does, we do take credit for knocking down storm surge when we have this marsh buildup. To participate in the program, it takes a non-federal sponsor. Talking with Ms. Sandy, the port has come forward with us. It's a cost share of 75-25. Federal government puts up 75% of the money. It has to be matched by the non-federal sponsor, which would be 25%. In this particular project we've developed, it's a $1.6 million to do the study and design and all the NEPA clearance. The federal government would put up $1.2 million, and the port would be responsible for $400,000. In the design phase, 100% of that can be done as work in kind. So that it doesn't have to be cash. It can be done 100% work in kind. In the next phase of this, once we have a project that we have declared approved by our commanding general, we have all the NEPA clearance, then we have to have a construction contract done with our dredging folks. That's another contract that we would have to implement for the construction side. That's also cost shared 75-25. And at that point, we normally bring in CPRAB. If we're consistent and they have Bud Mat beneficial use dollars, they have in the past cost shared on our projects with us. I'll pause there if there's any questions or any comments I can address.
Pink area?
I'm sorry, say it again.
Where was you going to put the mud, the dredge material?
We haven't decided the exact location yet, so we try to pick the best area that we can find. The areas that we are targeting are these areas that you see polygons around. Is there?
TP2 and 3.
Do you see TP2 or TP3, these polygons with the black shaded polygons?
Yeah.
Those are potential areas that we would place the material. So what we'll do is we'll pick 2 or 3 of these and we'll investigate them, and the one that maximizes our benefits, we sort of grade these things based on what we call a WVA, a wetland value assessment, where we come in and we value what the marsh would be, and we use an assessment that other agencies sort of recognize. We pick the one that maximizes that benefit. So we would take 2 or 3 of these, see which one maximizes the area that we can get the most bang for the bucks for it. Did I answer your question?
Yes, sir.
Thanks.
If I may, Darrell, that dredge material will be coming out of Tiger Pass. If I can find another $2.5 million, then I will be able to, $5 million? Okay. Then I'll be able to get it dredged down to its full level. So I know Commissioner Arbo and I are going up to D.C., and that's one of the things out on our list that we'll be talking to with our delegation.
Mr. Roussel?
Thank you, Mr. Russo, for your presentation. I have a couple of questions. The cells that are going to be filled, are those environmental servitude projects, or or can they be developed for industry?
No, once we place the material on there, we would, well, let me back up. The beneficial use through our program is one-time placement. It's intended for it to remain as marsh and not developed. But once we place the material and we're gone, we really don't come back behind it and look behind it. But the intent is the parish and the port would not develop these areas, because that's where we're placing the marsh there to actually serve as coastal protection as well.
So is there partnership agreement language to state that?
Yes.
And so we would not be able to do that. The second question I have is that, has there been any work done so far that would match for our contribution as far as the project development, or do you hire an engineering firm to do that?
No. All we've done at this point was develop a project, what we call a project management plan, that spells out how we would go about managing the project and how much the project would cost. So we've developed that at this point, and we're now ready to sign an agreement. So we haven't executed anything, and no work has been done to date.
And so then who would hire the engineering firm?
It would be up to the port.
Who would hire the engineering firm?
Yeah, it would be up to the port. As long as we have a non-federal sponsor, you can give us cash, or you can provide work in kind through actually working on the team with us and actually developing the project with us.
Also, we can go to private companies that are looking for that protection and ask them to make contributions, and that's what I plan on doing as well.
And so the match, the 25% match, would come from the port funds, and what funds would that be earmarked to do that?
Well, right now, we're just looking at our budget for next year, that 400, and then again, I'm going to go and contact private firms, Shell, Targa, et cetera, because they're wanting this protection, and, partner with them and see if they can pony up some to take some of that 400 off of us.
And the 400 that you have now, is that tariff money or advance rents money?
It would be tariff money.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Broussard. And our projects that we've worked with you in the past have been successful, and I thank you for your help in the past, and you might elaborate a little bit on those projects. We've done some BudMat projects in the area before.
Yes, we actually have 3 other projects in Plaquemines Parish. We did the very first one in 2015. We took material out of the river and we placed it in the West Bay receiving area. And shortly after we started placing material there, we're starting to see the land growth in West Bay. We did a second project with Plaquemines Parish where we taking material from what we call the HDDA, the head of passes, where we take all of our hopper dredges and we dump the material at the head of passes. When we clean that out, we typically bring it to the east side of the river. For this very first one, we actually took the material out of the river, put it on barges, barged it up to Venice, and part of the state master plan Spanish Pass project, we've built 1 mile of ridge to an elevation 6.5 feet. So that project is completed, and that was a success. And we have the second increment of that Tiger Pass project where we're adding the second mile to that. I think it's a 13-mile project in the state master plan. And so we've designed and ready for construction on the second mile. And I believe shortly after that, the state intends to build the remaining ridge part of that project. So we've actually done 3 successful projects with Plaquemines Parish and taking material where we dredge in the parish, which out of the Mississippi River, HDDA, and through Tiger Pass, we would be maximizing our beneficial use. So yes, we have been successful in Plaquemines Parish. We also have a couple of projects in Calcasieu. We have one on the Barataria Bay with Jefferson Parish. We had one with Terrebonne Parish off the Homer Navigation Canal. So our goal with the dredging program was to, every federal channel that we dredge in Louisiana, put a beneficial use project on it. Instead of putting material in CDFs or placing it back in the river, we actually want to take it and place it and help with coastal restoration.
Great, thank you.
I believe that in 2015, we were the first parish to implement that BudMat process Because I remember that, we went to DC to deal with that, to get that approval. The justification of doing the project was that it's $2, a project for you $1 type concept. So I know quite well what that's all about. We initiated that back in 2015. I was on that with the past president, that's deceased, his name was Courtney. We went up to DC to deal with that. And I think we were the first to implement that process.
Yes, and shortly after that, all the other parishes followed suit. Lake Charles did, Jefferson Parish did, Terrebonne Parish, all followed suit to help bring the projects forward. Most of the parishes initiate the design with us, and they put up the design money. And then when it comes to the construction, we then tap into CPRAB for the larger dollars to cost share with us and to construct them.
We just try to keep it a secret, so no, you wouldn't be able to go nowhere else but in Plaquemine. But what happened, it just exploded. But really, thanks for those efforts back then as well.
I also need to recognize John Helmers. We worked with him on this, and also the parish president, and we collectively are going to go do some door knocking and see if we can get some contributions from private industry.
Mr. Roussel would like to continue.
Yes, so that brings up the next question. The administration now is going to team up with the Port for Coastal Restoration Projects, or is the sponsor going to be the government, or it's going to be the port?
Key in. You got to press. All right, now, wait, press again?
Hello, all right. Thank you. The response is going to be a joint effort between us and the port. John Helmers is leading outside of the charge on the administration side. He sat in the meeting with Mr. Sanders, and he's keeping me abreast of what's going on. And personally, I want to thank Mr. Sanders and the port, or the port itself, for stepping up and doing the 25% match. And again, we're going to work on our end to do anything that we can help too. So
So the partnership agreement will state the Plaquemines Parish Government and the Plaquemines Parish Port Harbor and Terminal District, both entities?
yes, both.
No.
All right.
She said no.
Right now, it stays at the port.
Stay as the port.
So for the design component, right now, it stays the port.
Okay. Then it'll stay just the port.
So that brings the question up, is that, are we going to have two programs? We're going to have the port program and the government program?
We're going to have the port program first, and when the government has a program, we will bring that to you, and then we'll go from there. We don't have anything right now.
I guess my concern is that since the parish government has been successful, as you've heard from the Corps for many years, doing these projects, why have we deviated to the port other than the funding?
Because we haven't had the funding. That's why we're leaning on the port at this point and now.
I'm going to let it rest right now, but
Okay.
I'm concerned about the direction that we're going to go in if we're going to wind up with two separate coastal programs.
Okay.
So I'll leave it at that. Thank you.
Okay.
Damien, you want to add? Okay, thank you. Thank you very much. Excellent presentation.
Blank?
Just like to add that if you could please, let the commissioners know, especially me, I'm very interested in coastal restoration, very early when these projects are being conceived, and just, not at the last minute. Thank you.
Councilman Black?
Okay. Lastly, I have, again, Eric Sundstrom with Chesapeake Group and Chris Leopold, our state rep, provide a sit rep on what's going on up in the state legislative session. Prior to doing so, I would like to recognize, come on up, Rowdy Treadway. Rowdy was the one that brought this idea to us to possibly find some additional funding that we could get through the legislature for our crews and our firefighters. And, never discount where a great idea comes from, and so I'd like to recognize him. And then these two fellows right here took his idea and hammered it through the legislative process, and so it's a great cooperative effort, and thank y'all for doing it. You're up.
Thank you, Mr. Sanders.
State your name and address.
Chris Leopold, Phoenix, Louisiana.
Oh, you're from that side. That's completely out of your district, man. People gonna recall you, man.
Chris Leopold, 110 Victoria Drive. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Yes, sir.
It's good to be home. I thank you for the invitation to come before you as it relates to the most recent legislative session. I'm glad to say we were able to successfully get supplemental pay for Port Harbor and Terminal District employees who are fire rated certified. That'll be a $500 stipend per month. I think that'll help retain employees as the port grows. We won't have to have the turnover as much. Our competition has it upriver, and now we have it. It was not the most guaranteed venture in the legislative process because it involved money, and it's a scarce resource right now. We got together early, and with the help of Eric, with the resolution from you all, we worked together and got it through the whole process. So I was very, very pleased with that. The governor has actually signed this bill, so it is law. I have a lot of other legislation that has not been signed, and once it is signed, I think everyone will be pleased with the results of our efforts on other fronts. And before I go, I want to touch a real issue that will affect a bunch of people throughout the whole parish, and that's the Belle Chase Bridge and tunnel replacement. This concept was derived and originated with the administration through DOTD. My colleagues and I were notified about a year and a half ago. Since then, I've been very, very transparent and upfront on social media trying to get the information to the public. We meet every month as public officials, and the issues come up there. I have had the approach to hold back our opinion until we know all the details. We're getting close to knowing all the details. However, we don't know the minute details. This is a new process, the P3 process. It has not been done before in the state, and is trying to be done now in our backyard. That can be an opportunity, but it's also very frustrating at the same time because we're the guinea pig in this process. But I decided from the beginning to be very upfront about it as we move forward. I had a meeting at my office last Monday with a lot of people who had questions about it, who had reached out to my office directly, like I had asked while I was in session. We will have follow-up meetings, but I just spoke to the chairman of the Joint Committee this morning, Mr. Cortez, who attended our meeting a few weeks ago at the auditorium, you may recall, and he has assured me that there's going to be another joint meeting of the Transportation Committee prior to the execution of a contract. So what the public has seen thus far is just a proposal and only a proposal. It has not been executed. So we are gathering through our meetings points of contention or points of question so we can speak with one voice moving forward. I invite all of you all to continue to reach out to my office to participate. And I'm thinking that I have been told that the infra-grant deadline is sometime in August. So I'm trying to find out exactly when that date is and work backwards from that date, including a town hall meeting prior to the joint transportation. So again, thank you for your time, and I appreciate the opportunity to come before you. And if you have any questions, I'd be happy to address them.
Thank you, sir. Anyone have any question from the table? The Harbor?
Medicare program, why can't we tap into that and not have a toll?
I will convey that forward, Habo.
Wait. Go ahead.
Money comes from I think the money comes from the feds, and we're just not going to collect the money, the $400 million. That's the answer, I think. Right?
You can look at him when you say that. But,
All right.
Good afternoon, Mr. President, Mr. Chairman, members of the Commission. Eric Sundstrom with the Chesapeake Group, the lobbyist for the Port Harbor and Terminal District. Just to dovetail on what Representative Leopold said, House Bill 87, which was the supplemental pay, I consider probably one of the biggest victories that I personally have had, and I know with the port especially, to be able to bring back that kind of money, about $170,000 annually from the state. And also, should that fire safety rates go up for other firemen across the state, that supplemental pay, we will also get a boost. So, that is now Act 95. The governor signed that, I believe, last Wednesday. And not only with your help with the resolution, but with Representative Leopold, Senator Hewitt, who sat on the Senate Finance Committee that helped steer that through, and Senator Troy Carter, who was able to gather up members of the caucus to help carry that vote on the floor. I think it was just a fantastic piece of legislation that we brought back to Plaquemines Parish. We also have some things that we're watching in the capital outlay bill. As soon as the governor signs that bill, I'll be able to put that forward and let y'all know that it's locked up. And I think y'all have received that report over the weekend. So I'm just waiting for signatures right now.
Any comments from the table?
Thank you.
Audience?
Mr. Chairman, if I could just say one thing, I want to thank Mr. Leopold again and also thank Eric Sundstrom. I've really enjoyed working with Eric over the past year to get House Bill 87 passed. And now that we're going to move forward over the next 2 years with the significant changes in the legislature, I'm really excited moving forward. We're going to start, I want to say July or August. We're looking at really trying to plan ahead for the next session, just like we did last year. So I just want to say again, I want to thank Eric so much for all his work.
And if I could give a little special recognition to Donald Durr, who, that poor guy was with me during the Senate committee for about 8 hours. And I know that's rough. And he just kept looking at me going, how in the hell do y'all do this? So, but October will be about a 40% turnover in the legislature.
Right.
So we're going to be working with a lot of new people.
I'd like to suggest to the director that we acknowledge those front runners for us that's pushed the legislation through, and thanking them for their efforts in getting the job well done. Send them a letter. Councilman Black?
Yeah, I just want to reiterate that, Mr. Chairman, the recognition is deserved to the port staff for, obviously to Chris and the Plaquemines delegation for HB 87. Thank you, Eric, for the work you've done. I know you and I stayed on the phone quite a bit regarding 87 and House Bill 2. However, with that said, I am somewhat disappointed in 578. So I will just make that public comment known that I am still looking into 578 and find out why, how that kind of got through without any money coming to this area. But hopefully Chris will show me his coat with blood all over it. And but so we'll see. But anyway, I just wanted to make that comment known that I think a lot of people on this council are somewhat disturbed in 578 and how that whole transpired. So, but on HB 87, HB 2, thanks, Eric and Chris.
Thank you.
Representative Leopold?
Councilman Black, I'm glad you brought that issue up. And in my pattern of being direct, I will be direct with that bill. As a member of the most affected area or parish in the state, I took the floor on that bill when it left the House and questioned the author if he knew where the most damage occurred from the spill. And he told me he did not, so I kind of reminded him. But that bucket of money was for economic loss, and it was eligible to go across the entire state. When the bill came back, there were projects added to it on the other side, of which none came to Plaquemines. I voted against the bill. I voted no. At that time, I took the floor and questioned the author about the $20 million allocation going to Calcasieu, I believe, for a ferry. I was very direct in my questioning and asked him, I thought the state was out of the ferry business, as was the witness in Algiers. I have video of the testimony. I knew this was going to be an issue. However, I talked to my colleague yesterday, Representative Jay Morris from Northeast Louisiana, who also voted no. And there's a huge issue in that part of the state right now with this very same bill. There is a $40 million amount per year for the next 5 years that are eligible for other areas to spend on rural roads, where we'll have an opportunity there. That act is the will of the legislature, and that can change from year to year. These projects that they alluded to are not in the in the highway priority program. So I'm just wanted to let you know that I was very disappointed in that, and myself and my vote reflected that.
Yeah, I appreciate it, and I did notice that you did vote no. I think it was, like 92 to 11, or get a couple absent, but I do appreciate that. And I didn't want to make the comment, it wasn't the time or place to make it at WBIL or PABI luncheon yesterday, but I will say that the biggest disappointment that I saw, and I'm glad we're doing it at the port meeting, is because the Port of New Orleans was given $20 million for 2 cranes. And I want to give credit to the port staff we have here, because we're not asking them for anything. We're doing the port development, by ourselves. We're looking for terminal operators, and we're looking for investors. We're not looking for handouts from the state at this point. And for them to come in and get $20 million is almost a slap in the face to this port district. I will also say that the $20 million for the Cameron Ferry, no offense to the folks out in Cameron, but we have a ferry here that operates Belchase and Scarsdale, and between the 2 ferries we have, we're $3.9 million in deficit annually. The ferry we have in Scarsdale and Belchase, I mentioned that one because that ferry services 3 parishes. It services the folks from Orleans Parish, Plaquemines Parish, and St. Bernard. I would say a good portion from St. Bernard. So here we have an area that is in need of ferry repair, ferry upgrades, etc. And in a place like Cameron Parish gets $20 million for a ferry, like you said, I thought the state was out of the ferry business. So I just want to make that point on record. I didn't want to do it yesterday. I asked the questions to our delegation, but I just wanted to make those 2 issues known. That's I think parish-wide, somewhat of a gut-wrenching type of effect.
I agree and voted accordingly. I appreciate your comments, and it also compounds the issue on the toll for the Belchase Bridge as well.
I also like for you to get with your counterpart for the other part of Plaquemine Parish.
He voted no as well.
But he needs to step up as well to understand that east side was devastated more than any region in Plaquemine Parish for BP oil spill.
Right.
We have been destroyed economically, completed, dilated, diluted, without a doubt. So if anybody impact, then the greatest impact was in that area. And also the ferry, just like Councilman Black states, we do service the West Bank, which ultimately serve New Orleans. And we also serve St. Bernard because they travel that route on the east side to catch the Point Light Ferry and head north. So you see, those things work in conjunction. So no one can survive without the other to be efficient and effective. And the other thing is that being that the county seat is almost finished in the east side, then that means that area on the long end really should have been addressed as well on economical impact as well. So I'm just throwing that out there. So whenever you have a conversation with your counterpart, make him aware of that, because we have.
I caught what you were throwing.
Thank you, sir. Mr. Roussel?
Yes, I want to thank you for the work that you've done and the votes that you've cast. And as we've mentioned, without going through what's been said already, we all agree with those points about how disappointed and all everybody turned out to be. But in the legislation, I wanted to point out, as I mentioned yesterday to you, that the legislation prohibits projects that have Garvey bonds in them. And this project that we're talking about, the bridge replacement, has Garvey bonds in them. So there'll be a couple of lists that'll have to be made to the legislation if we try to move forward. And that's what I'm looking forward to, is moving forward to try to capture some of that funding down the line. That either the Garvey bond funding has to come out of the bridge project, or we have to take that out of the legislation that prohibits the project from getting any funding because of the Garvey bonds.
I agree.
So just a point that we want to make sure we are understanding.
Anyone else? Table, Councilman Black, you requested, you want to, okay. Audience, thank you very much for your updates. Appreciate it very much. Next item, please.
Financial report.
I have none.
Mr. Roussel? I'm sorry. Key back in, please. All right, good.
If we don't have a financial report, I still do have a question. I was looking through the current contracts, and I noticed under the Mercury Public Affairs LLC, there's an asterisk resolution/CEA needed for PPG payments currently being invoiced for PPG contract. Is the port paying checks to Mercury on behalf of the government?
The port has not paid a check to Mercury on behalf of the government. There has been an invoice issued for charges on behalf of the government, but it has not been paid.
And so, do they believe they have a contract with the government? Because in the budget hearing, remember you had told us that you had dismissed them and that they weren't going to be on the payroll. And the invoice, the fact that the invoice is being sent to the port concerns me as something that's going to be out there that they're going to say that we owe them, and there's no budget for that. And I want to make sure that no one's sending mixed messages to Mercury that we are going to pay them, especially if they're sending invoices to the port.
Want me to take that? I'll take that one. So it's initially, when we had initial talks with PPG administration, we looked at an opportunity for a quid pro quo. And we're still trying to figure out what that would be. So until we have a CEA in place where there's agreement to pay that additional cost for PPG, and that would be the quid, and then where's the pro quo, we haven't worked that out. So until that happens, there is no payment, because if there is a payment for them, essentially it would be a violation of the Constitution. And so what we're doing is holding on to that part of what the invoice was and communicating that with Senator Vitter and Mercury until we can figure out what the quid pro quo would be. So there is no payment to parish government from the port for those services when there's nothing being done in return, because again, that would be a violation of the Constitution and donations. So, Rennie, you have anything with that?
Well, having heard all of that, my question, I guess, is very basic. Does Mercury expect to be paid for the invoice that they submitted? Because we haven't worked out our quid pro quo, whatever you want to call it.
I call it quid pro quo.
I understand what you call it, but I'm concerned about the position that Mercury has taken, thinking that we're going to be paying them, when it was very clear to all of us that we were not going to be paying them. So I don't understand why they would be sending an invoice under some scenario of a quid pro quo when there's no budget item and no intention, and the chart is very clear about incurring debts with no appropriation. And if they're sending an invoice to me that's incurring a debt that we should not be incurring, and the message needs to be sent to Mercury that there is no budget, there is no contract, and you should not be sending invoices, no matter what you two guys are talking about, until this body decides to either appropriate the money and hire them or not. And we've already done that. Not. So I think it needs to be cleared up.
Well, I can't tell you what their expectation is, but I can tell you we canceled that contract. I think in February, we notified them that there was no budget. The government has no longer received any invoices since that date and wouldn't pay any invoices submitted to the government that date. Obviously, we can't speak for anything that's been sent to the port, but they've been put on notice via email, via formal letter, that the government does not have money to afford them, and I don't think we could have made it any clearer.
I would hope you'd make it clear to them so there'll be no idea of a quid pro quo coming down the pipe and Mercury quit sending the invoices. So that's the problem that I see developing.
I agree. So we'll communicate, Rennie, and we'll get with each other and just make sure that we also communicate with Mercury, and then everybody's on the same page.
Thank you.
Councilman Black?
With that said, since Mr. Russo says, and he's absolutely correct, that it is up to the council to make those decisions, send me a copy of Mercury's contract, send me a copy of Eric Sunstrom's contract. If we have any outstanding lobbyist contracts, send them to me. If we don't, send me a blank resolution for both of those two and these two, and we'll separate the lobbying contracts for the state and for the feds, and y'all do y'all's. And as council, as the council, we'll vote on this one, and as commission, as the port commission, we'll vote on that one. And there'll be no mixture of invoices or bills, or the duties will not be, will be merged.
Yes, sir.
Mr. Roussel?
I think that's where we're at right now. Because we didn't do a contract with Mercury for the government. Evidently, the port did a contract with them, so I think that's where we're at right now, Mr. Black. I don't know where the confusion is coming from for them sending an invoice to the port on behalf of, for instance, the government. Follow me? I think it's already just what you said.
Key in, please. Councilman Black?
Right, I'm just trying to make it clear to the contract, the folks who entered into the contract, that they either work for the port or they work for the parish. And that should alleviate your concerns on whether or not there's directions being given to Mercury or Mr. Sundstrom or whoever else by the parish or by the port. And in the contract, that's why I want to read the contracts to make sure it's clear that Mercury is doing port work and that they have no direction from the parish government, from the administration. And the same thing with Mr. Sundstrom, that he works for the port and the port commission, and there's no direction being given from the parish administration. That way we won't have these issues that you just brought up of whether or not there's confusion on the contracts. So, but I do want to review the contracts anyway to take a look at it, because I do think that with some of the failures we saw in 578, that possibly this parish needs to enter into another contract with a consultant or a lobbyist in Baton Rouge for the PPG. Thanks.
Any other comments? Table, audience? Next item, please.
Bids and advertisements.
None.
None.
Introductions of ordinances and resolutions.
Councilman Black, you have any? Harborough, Mr. Roussel? I have some. A resolution to change the location for the August 2019 port meeting and terminal district meeting, otherwise to provide respect thereto. A resolution authorizing Menard J. Sanders, Executive Director of the Plaquemine Parish Port Harbor and Terminal District, to enter into a cooperative endeavor agreement with the Greater Baton Rouge Port Commission for the utilization of the GBCRCC's Maritime Security Operations Center and otherwise to provide with respect thereto. A resolution authorizing Menard J. Sanders, Executive Director of Plaquemine Parish Port Harbor and Terminal District, to enter into a memorandum of agreement with the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers and New Orleans District concerning provisions of funds pursuant to the Section 1601 for the Water Resource Reform Development Act of 2014, otherwise to provide respect thereto. A resolution authorizing Menard J. Sanders, Executive Director of Plaquemine Port Harbor and Terminal District, to enter in design agreement with the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers design regarding BudMat, the Mississippi Outlet to Venice, otherwise to provide respect thereto. That's all I have. Anybody else have any?
No.
Okay. Next item, please.
6B, a resolution to amend Plaquemine's Port Harbor and Terminal District's Accounting and Procedures Manual to require execution of a written cooperative endeavor agreement with regards to any task, work, or service provided by any public entity for Plaquemine's Port Harbor and Terminal District, and to require the same regarding any task, work, or service provided by Plaquemine's Port Harbor and Terminal District for a public entity.
Mr. Chairman?
Yes.
It's my understanding that Mr. Gui has asked that that item be deferred at this time.
Okay, thank you. Next item, please.
C, a resolution authorizing the Port Executive Director, Maynard J. Sanders, for and on behalf of the Plaquemines Port Harbor and Terminal District to name and accept the proposal for of the Plaquemines Gazette as the official journal for the Plaquemines Parish Council as the sole governing authority of the Plaquemines Port Harbor and Terminal District, and of the laws provide with respect thereto.
I offer. Second. It's been offered second. Any questions from the table? Audience, machine is open. Passes 8-0.
D, a resolution rescinding a resolution adopted on June 20, 2018 in connection with a preliminary agreement between the Plaquemines Port Harbor and Terminal District and Plaquemines Liquid Terminals, LLC, to finance acquiring land and constructing dock, wharf, and rail improvements, pipeline and pumping infrastructure, blending/storage facility improvements, and any additional improvements related thereto, but retaining the right to reimburse Plaquemines Liquid Terminal LLC with proceeds of limited obligation revenue bonds in the future, and providing for matters in connection with the foregoing.
Mr. Roussel?
I'll offer this file. Next for a second.
Second? 2 seconds. County Vision Department. Questions from the table? Administration, audience?
Could you explain to the public what this resolution is about?
Yes, this is a resolution that's rescinding the authority to sell up to $650 million worth of bonds for the Plaquemines Liquids Terminal project. When they decided to go private funding, this was no longer needed, plus it's outdated because of the fact that it has to come back to the body to begin with if any further action was taken. But some of the language in here, for instance, to buy the property was for $10 million, and the property is already purchased, it's $30 million. So it's technically a house cleaning measure to get this off of the books, so there'll be no confusion to anybody in the public or in this body that there is an authority out there to sell $650 million worth of bonds. If that is a need to do public financing through bonds, then it'll come back to this table with the correct language, and it'll be reauthorized and then voted on accordingly.
I'm with you wholeheartedly, man. Just bragging on the $18 billion deal here. We got to publicly have bonds for this deal for. Come on, don't do the public this, man. Clean it up, and just do it the right way.
Mr. Chairman, just for the record, for the Port staff, we would concur with Mr. Roussel, so we ask that be moved on.
Mr. Conovich?
I had a question about it. Yeah. I wasn't at the meetings before, but I watched them on TV, and I seen where Tallgrass was going to donate $30.5 million to the parish to buy the property. All of a sudden, Plaquemines Liquid Terminal got in the middle. They got the money, then they gave the money to us. How did Plaquemines Liquid Terminal get in this deal?
Well, Tallgrass, Plaquemines Liquid Terminal is the LLC, that's the terminal operation. So, you guys can hear me? So, initially it was to buy the property, like Mr. Roussel was talking about, some of the funds. They went in and we received the funds to purchase the property. Tallgrass is in a joint venture with Drexel Hamilton, the investor, for Plaquemines Liquid Terminals. So there's a lot of interchanging of names here. It's much like Plaquemines LNG, even though they're a subsidiary to Venture Global LNG. So when Venture Global actually builds their facility, its official name is Plaquemines LNG, and the other official name would be Delta LNG. So the official name of this facility is Plaquemines Liquid Terminals, between a joint venture between Tallgrass Energy and Drexel Hamilton. So that's where the confusion is. But it's frankly really just interchangeable terms, if you will, at this point. That makes sense? Yeah.
Any other comments? Any comments from the public, audience? Machine is open. Passes 8-0. Next item, please.
Approval of the May 23, 2019 meeting minutes.
I offer, is there a second? Second by Councilman Blank. Question from the table? Audience? The machine is open. Passes 8-0. Next item. I offer for adjournment. There's a second?
Second.
Seconded. Who seconded? Mr. LaFrance. Alphonse here. The meeting is adjourned at 1:54. We're going to vote on it, yeah. And we're going to have about 10 minutes start before we get to the council meeting. Machine is open for vote. Passes 8-0.